This is Peter Salemi of the British Israel Church of God, and today we have a special guest on the program. His name is Yair Davidiy from Israel, and he wrote many books. I have one copy that I have of his book called The Tribes. If this looks kind of weird, Yair, I got two cameras going, one for the audience and one for me and you. So if I'm not looking at you, then now you know why. This is one of my copies called The Tribes that I picked up, I think 1995 I picked this up when I read it. And I have the other copies as well, but this is the main book that describes who are the lost 10 tribes of Israel in this end time. And so here's Yair Davidiy. Yair, can you kind of give us an introduction, tell us your background, where you're from?
Okay, so I was born in Australia, but I've been in Israel since 1974, just most of my life, because I might look it, but I'm not that old. So most of my life I have lived in Israel. And I researched the lost 10 tribes. I researched the whereabouts of the lost 10 tribes. As everyone knows, there were 12 tribes of Israel. These 12 tribes separated after the death of King Solomon into two separate sections. They were separate kingdoms. After a few hundred years, the northern kingdom was conquered by the Assyrians, taken away into exile into different portions of the Assyrian Empire, and there they lost awareness of their ancestry. They became the lost 10 tribes of Israel. Nevertheless, they are mentioned in the Bible. The Bible speaks about them quite often. And prophecy projects them as having to play an important role in the end times. So there are a lot of different theories as to where the lost 10 tribes went. One of the theories, long-standing, is that they were actually to be found amongst Western nations. The British peoples, the peoples of Scandinavia, the peoples of the Netherlands and France, and all that region. Don't say that everyone in that area is descended from lost tribes of Israel, but that is where those 10 tribes are to be found. And this notion, this concept, this belief was quite popular in different parts of the world. I, as a young man, came across literature concerning it. I was interested in it, but I couldn't find anything that actually was overwhelmingly convinced me, one could say, but I always put it aside. I came to Israel. I began learning in rabbinical institutions in yeshivot, under different frameworks. I was also living a normal life. I was married, had children, and had responsibilities. And I took an interest in that, and I kept on coming, coming across sources that seemed to indicate there was something to this notion. Also, I was constantly interested. I was raised with a profound understanding, one could say a deep thirst to understand historical matters. So this, together with the sources I come across in rabbinical writings, also in the Hebrew Bible, developed within me an urge, a drive, one could say, to find out if there was anything in this belief or not. And so eventually I did. I dedicated myself to deep studies, to intensive studies on the subject. It took me quite a while. I became convinced that it was true. And from there, everything, one could say, developed. I put out the book. That book you have is the first book. After that, I put out other books, and I've been trying to promote. I have been promoting this belief as well as I can ever since.
I see. Yeah, when I received this book, when I bought it, I couldn't believe the detail when it from the historical sources, the detail you go into. You get ancient maps and other things, the language and how you trace the migrations. It's an incredible book. It's the most detailed book that I've read on the subject.
I worked at, first of all, Edison, Thomas Edison, who invented the electric bulb. He is quoted as saying genius is 99% perspiration, 1% inspiration. So I worked very hard at putting the book out and researching it, but I also had help from one could say from divine providence, helped me find certain sources go in certain directions.
Absolutely.
That's what there is.
Now, you answered the first question I was going to give you, so we'll go on to the second one. Does Judaism recognize this doctrine?
No, Judaism, Judaism as it now exists, is very conservative, very because of through historical circumstances and the surrounding imperatives of reality. Judaism concentrates only on what has to be done immediately at the person. Anything else, any kind of theory, any kind of idea, any kind of conception that goes beyond that, Judaism is an official body. These leading rabbis do not relate to it. They do not even take an interest in it. But if they do, they keep it privately to themselves. We have not had official support from any Jewish sources, but neither have we had opposition. We've received encouragement. We've had a lot of some of our best supporters are religious Jews.
I see.
But as a body, we cannot say we have not received any recognition.
I see. I remember back when I was reading your book, I was actually working for an office that was predominantly Jewish. It was in the stock market, and they saw me at lunchtime. I was reading your book at the time, and they knew about the doctrine. They would say, yeah, I've heard about this, but they never really looked into it. A lot of them were Orthodox Jews, and they really didn't look into the topic, but they knew about it.
Yes, the topic has been around. We did not invent the topic.
Right.
The topic has been a few hundred, possibly going all the way back to the beginning, but certainly for the last couple of 100 years, the topic has been known about. Jews take an interest in it. I've always taken an interest in it. They read up on anything which is written about it. Unfortunately, in recent generations, people who have ulterior motives or people who are anti-Jewish have taken this doctrine or something similar to it and tried to craft it into all kinds of racial theories, all kinds of things which are against the Jews.
Right.
So that has given the idea a bad name. People are a little bit, they have a certain degree of trepidation about approaching it, about finding something new. So we try and show that also in Jewish sources is a foundation to what this idea contains.
I see.
Emphasis.
So why do you think many outside of Judaism, why do you think many scholars and historians reject this truth? Because, as I said about your book, you go into many historical sources, ancient maps, yet a lot of historians and scholars just reject it for some reason.
So there's a combination of reasons. First of all, the basic foundations of the doctrine is based on Scripture, and people are afraid of Scripture. Academics especially are afraid of Scripture, afraid of anything which smacks of religion, because even if they privately might tend to think there's something to it, their peers would reject it. They would be laughed at amongst their colleagues. They cannot be seen to have trends in that direction, even though some of them might well have. And we use academic sources, and sometimes we have the impression that they also use us. They get information leads from us. So it's a touch-and-go situation. But as I said, first of all, also the climate today is atheistic, agnostic. Religion is not popular. And even if it is popular, you have different doctrines, different associations. We also have an international situation with the Jews and Palestinians and who knows what. And as I said before, also that there have been people in the past who have been anti-Semitic, who have racist agendas, also taken this idea and tried to craft it into their own nefarious and evil lines of thought, and this has given it a bad name.
Interesting. Now, many talk about genes, genetics, when it comes to this doctrine. Many people say that the genetics between the Jews and the Anglos, the Scandinavians, they don't really line up. Stephen Collins, which you probably know of.
Yes, I know. I've met him. He was in Israel. We're good friends.
Oh, okay. Now, he says in his article, an article he wrote, DNA of Judah and the Lost 10 Tribes, he writes that God does not consider DNA when reckoning what tribe a person belongs to. The Bible narratives record that God reckons tribal affiliation via their patrilineal lineage through time. But what's your idea on genetics? Because I know you've written extensively on your website about that.
Yes, because nowadays an appeal to the DNA evidence has a lot of weight. It is also an obstacle in the path of what we teach being accepted by very many. They want to see something what does DNA say, what people have from DNA. So we do not reject the DNA altogether. We think that in the short run, or even in the long run, when seen in the right under the right perspectives, it does say something. It does give us a certain lineage.
Right.
Certain aspects of it that are incontrovertible. Someone has an accident, and they go and check up his DNA, and they prove who he is. Like, so maybe they're mistaken here and there, but on the whole, this is what happens. This is what there is. So you cannot reject it altogether. But our impression is, the impression that we have received proves sources that we have studied concerning it, the DNA ultimately relates back to environment.
I see. So there are different factors when it comes to DNA.
Yes, and we have proven this, or we're in the process of proving it. The DNA is ultimately determined by environment. It also has an hereditary element, and certain aspects of the hereditary aspect of it will actually be shown to prove, or at least be consistent with what we are speaking about.
I see. And also outside of DNA, there are other physical proofs of the Israelites. Like I've seen on your website paintings of what the Israelites looked like back in ancient times.
Yes.
And they look like the way they do today, Caucasian type,
Yes.
red hair.
Yes.
I see.
The Egyptians depicted the peoples in the lands surrounding them. They also depicted peoples in the land of Israel. And some of these depictions are of Israelites. And we also have engravings in ivory and pottery of Israelites from this area and other sources. Also historiographical sources, writings, descriptions, putting them all together, that the physical appearance is not inconsistent. It's not inconsistent with the connection between Western Europeans and the people and the Jewish people.
I see. Yeah, and also when you look at the Beth Histon rock in Persia,
Yes.
where they show the Israelites on that big rock, they look, Caucasian, as well as that King Jehu that you see kneeling down on that big obelisk before the Assyrian king.
Yes.
They're Caucasian looking.
Yes, for what it's worth, they are. There's no contradiction there.
Right.
That's at the minimum level. You can say there's no contradiction.
Right. Now, what are some of the main points that identify Ephraim as Britain and the United States as Manasseh?
So one of the points is that in the blessing of Jacob, Jacob was also known as Israel. When Jacob blessed Ephraim and Manasseh, the sons of Joseph, it says especially that he put Ephraim before Manasseh. He also laid his right hand on the head of Manasseh, and this, according to simple meaning, and also according to commentators, mean that Ephraim would become a greater before Manasseh. So you have the USA historically emerged from the British people. So going on the chronological parallel alone, you already have Ephraim becoming great before Manasseh. We also have he shall become Zari Mala Goyim, his seed shall be a multitude of people, and this is what the British Empire did become. This is what they did. They fulfilled the simple meaning of the Hebrew verses. Also, according to rabbinical commentators, they fulfilled the aspects of Ephraim. We also have the very name England. The name England came from Angleland.
Angleland.
The Angles and the Saxons conquered what is now England, and the Angles gave their name to England. The Angles on the continent before they invaded the British Isles, also known as Agli. That was in the Germanic tongues. That was another way of saying the name Angle. Also, in Hebrew, we have a nickname for Ephraim. It's found in Jeremiah 31. Is Agli, or Agel. Agel means bull calf. A bull calf was the symbol of Ephraim. It's a nickname for Ephraim found in the Bible. And according to the Midrash, it was also on the standard of Ephraim. And Agli, the bull calf, and even a nickname for England is John Bull. Agli in Hebrew can also be pronounced as Angli.
Angli.
Which is similar to angle. And angles also could be pronounced similar to aguloi. So in effect we can say that they're one and the same word, because on both sides of the equation they use the same name. So that England from that point of view may be considered to mean the land of the bull calf, and meaning Ephraim. Also the very name Ephraim, we have the name Ephrathi in Hebrew, meant someone who was an aristocrat.
Oh, the aristocracy, yeah.
Yeah, and you have the aristocracy in England, and that's probably the only country in the world where you still have it, where it still really means something. So this is a characteristic of Ephraim. And we have quite a few other indications. That is the quality of Ephraim is to be found amongst the British people.
I see. So the main point that Ephraim is Britain is mainly because of the blessings that God promised Ephraim.
Yes.
And
also because of the name.
Right.
And the characteristics of aristocracy. And we also have the tribal clans who seem to have a predominance in England. And we have other proofs as well pointing in the same direction concerning England being Ephraim. And we also, on the other hand, on the other side, we have proofs identifying the USA with Manasseh. So we have Ephraim and Manasseh, so one or the other.
Right. Well, I found it interesting that when you said about in ancient Israel, Manasseh didn't like the monarchy.
Yes.
That
is not a finding of mine. That is Rabbi Schlanger, who wrote a book of investigating biblical matters without any connection whatsoever with those 10 tribes. I don't think I spoke to him on the phone, but he's not into that line of thinking.
I see.
He's simply analysing the Hebrew names, the Hebrew expressions, and he came to the conclusion that the kings or the princes of Manasseh were always appointed for a limited portion of time, for a limited purpose. They were like presidents. They had limited powers, whereas for Ephraim it was just the opposite. Also, the very name Menasha in Hebrew means responsible representation. As this too is from a biblical commentary from Rabbi Shimshon Hirsch, who also had nothing to do with the lost atoms, nothing to do with the miracle. He's simply analysing the meaning of the Hebrew names. So we take these different sources and put them together, and this is what we have.
That's incredible. Just the parallels are just amazing. Even Stephen Collins wrote that, which I didn't notice before, but when you look at the ancient maps of the tribes of Israel where they settled, you see Ephraim on the part of Manasseh on the east side of the Jordan River, and the other half on the west side of the Jordan River, and you see the United States half live on one side and half live on the other side. So even the geography is incredible. So
Yes, it's a good point.
yes. Now, the next question I want to ask you, I was amazed how you described the current situation in Britain with Islam out of the book of Hosea. In Hosea,
Chapter 9.
Right, chapter 9, verse 6 and 7. Now, can you just elaborate a little bit more on that?
Well, first of all, the whole book of Hosea is mainly or almost entirely concerned with the lost 10 tribes. Yeah, Hosea describes lost tribes, describes how they are quite some of our best lines of evidence derived from Hosea. In this chapter, Hosea speaks of just a second, I'll look it up in the Hebrew. Chapter 9, Hosea. He says, we have it here. He speaks of verse. I don't know how it's translated in English. I've forgotten, but in Hebrew it speaks of going down to Mitzrayim, to Egypt, to connection with Egypt, to Egypt being robbed. Also, then he speaks about Mahmad, meaning in Hebrew, Mahmad in Hebrew means desire, something to be desired, or pleasant is translated sometimes. But Mahmad also is another way of saying Muhammad.
Right.
And we have a connection here. And we have, in the next verse, in verse 7, we have someone called Evil Hanavi, the evil prophet, the evil crazy prophet, or the easy insane prophet, Evil Hanavi Meshuggah. And this, according to Maimonides, who's a great rabbi, is referring to Muhammad. It's referring to Islam. So here we have two verses connecting us up to Islam. And it talks about this in the next verse, in verse 8. It speaks about Ephraim, and Ephraim attempting to make a connection with the God of the prophet, which could be some type of attempted rapport with Islam. And then it speaks of a snare, of a trap, and uses the word Yakush, Pak Yakush, which in modern Hebrew is for terrorist bomb.
Oh,
same word.
Really?
And also it talks about great hatred, which is spoken in the house of their God, or the house of their God. And this is what in the mosques, when they speak against the Western world, they speak against Britain and America, and they speak against the Jewish people. So this all relates up, and there's more in the whole chapter, the whole atmosphere of which is inculcated by this chapter. It goes in that direction.
That's incredible. I mean, it describes the situation exactly today, especially in Ephraim or Britain. And, you know, what you said about verse 8, it talks about the watchman of Ephraim. And then, contrary to that, there's the prophet that is a snare, a foul, and the hatred in the house of his God. So you see a prophet among Ephraim that is full of hate. And like you said, with the terrorist bombings and everything, I mean, it's incredible, this prophecy, how it describes the modern day. And you can only know that when you know who is the lost 10 tribes of Israel.
Yes, it's a proof. This is another proof in its own way, confirming what we have been saying